This is an average, everyday birch tree in Minecraft. But honestly, there's not much of a difference to an oak tree. And in real life, birch trees actually look somewhat like this. So it's not that accurate. So yeah, the shape, the form, and the height isn't quite correct. So in this guide, we are going to look at how it could look when you're building some custom trees. In other words, how they should look. First of all, don't be afraid to actually build a couple of little saplings. Just put them around in your forest to kind of show that there's also some younglings in there. Some young saplings, some young trees that have just grown out of the ground. In survival mode, you'll probably have to put a string on top of it so that it doesn't grow, but I think even then it looks pretty good because most of the time you're not going to see it. Moving on, we then have the first stage, which is kind of a little bigger sapling. It's still a little small, I mean, it's still about 3 meters tall, but still. For Minecraft standards, this is a pretty small tree. So yeah, as you can see, there's only a little bit of diorite wall in there, which actually looks quite a lot like the birch logs. And then just simply putting a couple of leaves on top to make everything be an actual tree. But this doesn't really look much like a tree, it's more like a little stump with some leaves on top. So this is a little bit more like it. It has quite a couple more of those walls and even a full block in it. And yeah, as you can see, it's going quite high. It's now about 7 meters or blocks tall, which is already quite a lot even for Minecraft standards. And yeah, it just looks like a tiny little tree. It's not tiny, but it's not that big either. So yeah, you can kind of make some branches and tweaks going out with those walls, and I think it looks pretty convincing. Because this still looks kind of small and a little bit pressed down, I'd say, we can now move on to the normal variant, the kind of variant that you could use in a normal forest or something like that, which actually has a little bit more height and even a little bit more detail. Starting off with the trunk, we now even have some normal birch wood in there. I've used the wood, but you can also use the logs, but I think it looks a lot better if you can't see the middle part of it, but just the bark around it. Down at the bottom here, I've also put in a little button to simulate those, I don't know how it's called, but those little circles where branches used to be, and I've actually put it kind of at the position where a branch used to be on this tree, and we've even kept it all the way over there. So yeah, up at the branches, it is a little bit more chaotic with all the leaves inside, and honestly from the outside you don't really see it, so it doesn't have to be that logical. It'll just have to produce a good looking end result. And as you can see, it looks pretty good. I also have this cone shape, or egg shape, which is basically a little bit more broad on the middle and a little bit lower over here. And then it gets very thin at the top, but not really thin in the sense of being like this. So it's not pointy like that, but it has definitely a tip that is somewhat, yeah, it works. It looks somewhat realistic. And now on to the big fella. Even though the trunk is way too thick for a realistic normal birch tree, as you can see here, but I think it still looks pretty good, and you know what, it's still Minecraft, and if we can have a birch tree all the way there on the side of my head, if it can look exactly like an oak tree in total, you know what, we'll get along with it being just a little unrealistic at the bottom here. So yeah, let's analyze this thing a little bit. We first of all have the roots coming out of here. Roots with diorite slabs. I quite like to use blocks for the bark that actually have slab, wall, fence or stair variants, because it just makes the forming and shaping way easier. As you can see, it looks way more dynamic like this, instead of if there would be just simply the blocks, the full blocks like this. So yeah, I think it works just fine. Also the walls here can make a great smoothing tool. Then yeah, the little button where a branch used to be, and now onto the crown of this whole thing. The branches are very, very chaotic, and honestly, as long as it has a general shape and there is some blocks in between it, it doesn't really matter how well they are executed. In the oak tree it's a little bit more important because there you can see most of it, and there actually needs to be like some actual branches that you can follow and that are actually connected to the outside, but with the birch tree it's not that much of a big deal. So yeah, this for example is the way I did it. If you really want to, you can pause the video and you can then actually rebuild it. But honestly, I strongly recommend that you actually try to build one in creative mode and then simply try it out for a couple of, maybe half an hour, maybe a full hour, whatever you have time for, and then just practice and you will get something very good. And then the leaves, just plop them around and make sure that there's a couple of air blocks in between it so that it isn't just some balls on top of each other, like you can see here, and there's a gap right here. And yeah, it just has to look airy and it has to be a little bit more scattered around, and then I think it'll look just like a pretty good old birch tree, and that even quite realistic. If you have any questions on how to do that, or if you actually need a little bit more of a detailed explanation, then of course I'm always available on my Discord server or in the comment section of this video. Before we end this video, I want to make a tiny little announcement, because Marcel Mass is getting closer and closer, and in only a couple of days there will be the first video of the Marcel Mass calendar. If you have no idea what the Marcel Mass calendar is, or even Marcel Mass in general, I kind of explained it in the last episode of Greenia, so if you actually want to know what it is, the link is on the top right corner of the screen. Anyways, I hope you found this video helpful and or at least a little bit interesting. So that, see you in the next one.